Welcome back to AI Today. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Badeau. If you're just tuning in, we're deep diving into the world of artificial intelligence, exploring its potential to transform our lives and our businesses, and the challenges that we are facing every single day. And we're trying to bring some awareness around that. This week, I'm honored again to have Mr. Ben Neivert from DBT Aero. He is the chief of staff, recently hired chief of staff. I think he's been there a little less than a month, actually. But he's got an extensive background in, aerospace and mechanical engineering and using AI across a lot of different fields of, the aerospace industry. Especially, he started his work at, Cessna, and then it really grew from there, becoming a consultant to the likes of Boeing and British Aerospace and the Royal Australian Air Force. And Ben, great to have you back on the show.
Great to be back. Love it. Great conversation.
Yeah. So this week is we're talking about one of the more interesting topics of where AI is, and in some cases, a little bit more controversial, even. And it's really around AI's involvement in the software development space, whether that is, building the software or managing the software. Ben, from your perspective, what do you think some of the biggest challenges are to having AI do those sort of things in an industry where a lot of folks were put their lives on the line to do that kind of work and test and even ride on some of these airplanes? It scares a lot of people.
Yeah, I think AI is extremely well suited in the test environment. You can run a very large number of scenarios against the piece of software to determine how the software will respond to those scenarios. And it can do that very quickly. It can even look at the outcomes and generate new scenarios to test weaknesses that it's starting to identify. So it can actually exploit a weakness that it finds to see what the final outcome of the software would be. Developing software can be easier depending on what you're doing. If it's part of the software where you've got a lot of transparency in the model, you understand how it's writing the code. In a lot of cases, it's searching for existing code or similar code and then doing slight modifications. It's looking at what you're coding and helping you to close loops, or helping you to manage and track and appropriately apply variables, helping you minimize subroutines. There's a whole bunch of opportunities in the test environment where it's very strong, and a little less limiting, or a little more limiting, in the development opportunities for AI in assisting a human to more efficiently code, especially mission critical software. But the key to the whole thing is transparency. You've got to understand where the model came from and how it's thinking and how it's analyzing your software.
Yeah, and I think you touched on an awful lot of good points there, Ben. When we as developers and engineers, we always like to push the boundaries of things, and as we're trying to do things better, faster, cheaper, more efficient, of course, we want to integrate AI into our software development lifecycle, because it is, such an accelerator in what we can do from a day-to-day activity. The challenge I think that folks have is that separation between, and your words were spot on, mission critical type software development, which is very different than your normal, everyday application like a Word or something like that. So as you're looking at that, from that angle, Ben, what are some of your customers, what are some of their thoughts around how are they going to regulate software, for aerospace and those kind of things, and flight for when AI is developing some of that software, or how are they looking at integrating into their processes the certification of software that is developed by AI?
Right. And now, first, I won't pretend to speak for my customers or the regulatory authorities that oversee this work, but experience is the transparency and the security. They're going to be looking at being able to to confirm the outcomes of the tests are repeatable, they're reliable, and that there isn't a way, or at least an easy way, for someone to interfere with that outcome. So they want to be sure that the language model you're using or the software that you're coding into these critical systems is secure, that it can't be inappropriately modified, and that any updating process in itself is transparent and secure and controlled, and that they can log it. So if you look at even going back a long time when I was a charter pilot, and Jeppesen would produce these pages for approaches, and every time an approach changed, you would get a revision page, and that page was coded so you knew which page was the most recent, how it's changed, and you would insert it in the right place. The regulatory authorities can look at exactly the same model with AI. If you're using AI to create the software, they're going to test that software and be sure it's transparent. If you're using AI in the software, if the software is looking at a very large number of variables, if it's learning as it travels, the regulatory authorities and customers are going to want to know how it's doing that. And certainly recently with the Boeing incidents, there's a lot of information that the manufacturers have that don't always get communicated to the pilots and crew. Sometimes that's very appropriate, makes perfect sense. The crew doesn't have to know everything. But sometimes it's really important that the crew understand how the system works, so that when something happens in flight, they know what corrective action to take. And the regulatory authorities and the customers in general, they're going to want to know what part of this AI model affects the operation of the aircraft, and understand how it's going to affect the operation of the aircraft.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge point, because as we've seen with using AI to develop software, at least up to until this point, you oftentimes don't get the same answer when you ask it to do the very same thing. You go in, try to make a correction to it, your software is going to change fundamentally. And from an AI perspective, that also means that the answer that it's giving is changing for a variety of different reasons. And it's really hard from a repeatability perspective to say the AI is going to say the same thing under each scenario each time. And I think that's definitely a concern that folks have, and especially the reason why we can't turn these systems over to AI and let them just manage everything, because that's, one, it's not safe, and two, it's definitely not practical. And so I think there's a lot of conversation that needs to be had around this area. And I know folks at the FAA and some other governing bodies are looking at that, but it is definitely a concern for folks. Ben, from your perspective at DBT Aero, what are you guys looking at using AI for around the software?
Well, I'm going to go back for just a second, real quick. A lot of AI work is done with training modules, so they can get repeatable outcomes. So when you're developing the initial versions of the software and you're testing it, you're actually containing it to learning from a known model, so that you're hoping that if the software is working correctly, it will come up with repeatable outcomes because you've severely limited the input. So that's important to get a baseline.
That is. Yes,
and
great
now
point.
You're right. You're right that once you release it into the world, if you will, and it's picking up all the data from all the sensors available on an aircraft, yeah, you're going to get different answers, because a slight change in a variable might end up being very important, and the model will account for that. But you want to be sure you're tracking it to understand where a small change in one thing doesn't cause an outsized response from the software. Now, how we're using it, we're early in the game, and so we're looking at it across the board, certainly in helping us develop our software. And don't forget, we're building an aerodynamic structure. So we build the fuselage, we build the aircraft, and we have to integrate that with some kind of propulsion unit. And so we're going to be looking at AI to help us to really develop that integration. So the propulsion systems are going to have their software. Our software is going to have to integrate with that software to get the right outcomes. And we will be looking at AI to run a very wide range of tests over a very short period of time to make sure that that integration is clean and that the pilots and crew can operate the aircraft safely and understand that integration, because that's
Yeah.
pretty important. So they'll get the response they expect. If you hit the go around bar, you expect the plane to go to full power, to pitch up, to bring the flaps to a certain condition. Once it gets positive rate of climb, the gear comes up, all kinds of actions take effect. You hit one button. You expect that outcome. If the software doesn't perform, you want to know why.
Yeah.
And it has to be clear to you how the AI and whether you need to turn off the autopilot and manually fly out, or whether the autopilot is in fact doing the right thing because of the condition you don't understand. So we're looking at it across the gamut. When we look at our critical software, we're definitely looking at it in a test environment. We are definitely looking at it to shorten the cycle time in developing the software that makes the aircraft work, which is critical to getting our product into the market. You know, we don't want to spend 5 years focused on writing software.
That's right. Yeah. And I think I do want to say this, you know, from the discussions that we've had, the things that I've seen that you all are doing, you know, you really are at the forefront of this integration and this boundary, and trying to help folks understand the, you know, that relationship between AI and pilot and system and everything else that is taking place over there. Really, you know, I would say one of the industry leaders by far in this field, and you know, I really you know, commend you all for the amount of detail and work that you're putting into those sort of things. Ben, where can people find you at if they have any questions about this?
The easiest thing to do is go to our website, which is DBT Delta Bravo Tango, dbt.aero, AERO, aero.aero, dbt.aero. And from there, you can contact us, you can reach out. The website is being updated this week. So if you go at the end of the week, early next week, you're going to see some new pages. We're just putting them together now. That's going to allow you to decide what area in particular. Are you a general aviation pilot? Are you interested in drones? Are you an enterprise looking at corporate examples like cargo or corporate travel? There's going to be places for you to interact with us, submit your information, and we'll provide you with a reply and provide you with updated information as it becomes available. So we would love to have people come to the website, dbt.aero, and we'll certainly keep in touch with you through that. That's the best way.
That's fantastic. You know, I appreciate you being here again. You know, Ben, thank you for the conversation around, you know, AI and software. It is a concern for a lot of folks. We got a long way to go before we figure all this out, but I really hope that folks come to you for some additional guidance around that. And, you know, for our audience, stick with us. We are going to continue some of our using AI in the software development space discussions. And we'll be back after this short commercial break.